Let me go. You're hurting me.
You have exactly 3 seconds to remove your hand from her wrist before I remove it for you.
You have exactly 3 seconds to get your hands off her before this becomes the last decision you ever make. His voice did not rise. That was the thing about Kang Jae-won. He did not need volume. He had never needed volume. The kind of man whose quiet was more dangerous than any other man shouting. He was standing at the entrance of the Busan Grand Hotel rooftop at 11:47 at night, and his eyes were on Ola's hand wrapped around Zara's wrist, and everything else in the world had ceased to matter. Ola turned. He had not heard him coming. Nobody ever heard Jae-won coming. That was also the thing about him. Who are you? Ola's voice was steady, charming. The specific charm of a man who had never in his life encountered a situation he could not talk his way out of. He looked Jae-won up and down, took in the height of him, the jet black hair with the single streak of silver running through it catching the rooftop light, the silver burning at both temples, the tattoos, climbing from his knuckles up both hands disappearing into his sleeves, the compass with no needle tattooed at his collarbone where his shirt was open at the throat. He looked at all of it, and made the specific mistake of deciding it was manageable. I said, "Who are you?" Jae-won looked at him for exactly 2 seconds. Then he looked at Zara. She was standing with her wrist in Ola's grip and her chin level, and her face doing the thing it always did when Ola had her somewhere she could not leave. Composed on the surface, everything underneath it locked down so tight it had no air. She was wearing a deep green dress, and her natural hair was down around her shoulders, and there was a mark beginning to form at her wrist where his fingers were pressing, and Jae-won looked at that mark for 1 full second. 1 second. Then he crossed the rooftop. He did not run. He moved the way he moved through everything. Decided. Final. The outcome already certain before the first step landed. Ola saw him, coming, and made his second mistake. He stepped in front of Zara like he was making a point. Jae-won stopped directly in front of him. Close. The kind of close that had nothing to do with conversation. 3 seconds, he said. Quiet. Absolute. We're up before I finish saying them. What happened next took 8 seconds and left Ola on the rooftop floor with his back against the railing and both wrists pinned above him, and the specific understanding in his eyes of a man who has just discovered he miscalculated everything. Jae-won crouched in front of him, brought his face level with his, the streak of silver in his dark hair catching the rooftop light, the tattoos on his hands visible where they held Ola's wrists against the railing. "Look at me," he said. Ola looked. "If you touch her again," Jae-won said, each word its own sentence, its own complete weight, "they will not find enough of you to send back to London. Are we clear?" Ola said nothing. Jae-won waited. "Are we clear?" "Yes." Barely a sound. Jae-won stood, released him, straightened his shirt collar with one tattooed hand, like the last 40 seconds were a minor interruption between more important things. He turned around. Zara was standing 3 feet away with one hand pressed flat to her sternum, and her eyes on his face, and her breathing doing something she could not entirely control. He crossed to her, stopped directly in front of her, close, his eyes going immediately to her wrist, to the mark Ola's fingers had left. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked at her face. "Did he hurt you?" Not a question, a reckoning. She looked up at him, at the jaw set so tight the muscle moved, at the streak of silver in his dark hair, at the tattoos on the hand he was now raising slowly toward her wrist, at the man who 48 hours ago was nothing but a name on a contract, and was now standing on a Busan rooftop at midnight having just rearranged the entire atmosphere of the evening on her behalf, without being asked and without looking like he expected a single thing in return. "I'm fine," she said. "That is not what I asked you." She looked at him, at everything he was, at everything she did not yet know how to say. Behind them, Ola was getting to his feet. 2 of Jae-won's security men materialized from the rooftop entrance, like they had been there the entire time. They took Ola by the arms without a word and walked him toward the elevator. And he looked back at Zara once over his shoulder with the look she knew. The look that said, "This is not finished." She held his eyes until the elevator doors closed, and he was gone. Then she breathed out. Jae-won was still standing in front of her, still watching her face with an expression that had no distance in it at all. "Zara," he said. Just her name. Quiet. Carrying everything he was not yet saying. She looked at him. Something on that rooftop shifted permanently between them. What happens next changes everything. Wherever you are watching this, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far a story about a woman who flew 12,000 kilometers to outrun her past, walked into the office of the most dangerous man in Busan thinking it was just a job, and ended up being seen by the one person she never planned for, can travel. And if this story found you at a moment when you needed to be reminded that being truly seen is possible, that it can find you when you least expect it, behind the desk of a man everyone else is afraid of, on a night when you are just trying to survive, then you already know you need to stay for what comes next. Subscribe, because this is only the beginning. 6 weeks before that rooftop, Zara did not know Kang Jae-won existed. 6 weeks before that rooftop, she was sitting in the bathroom of a London flat at 2 a.m, with the door locked and the tap running so nobody could hear her. Not crying. She had stopped crying 4 months ago when she understood that crying changed nothing and cost her energy she needed for other things. She was sitting on the cold tile floor with her back against the bath, and her phone in her hands scrolling through job listings, with the specific focus of a woman who has made a decision and is now executing it before the weight of it stops her. Ola was in the next room, asleep, unaware. She had been planning this for 3 months. Not dramatically, practically. The way she approached everything. Methodically, without emotion, one step at a time. A savings account he did not know about. A storage unit 2 boroughs away. Copies of every document that mattered. She was a lawyer. She understood paperwork. She understood evidence. She understood that leaving a man like Ola required the same precision as building a case. Every detail accounted for. No loose ends. The Busan listing appeared at 2:14 in the morning. Personal legal counsel. Kang Corporation. Busan, South Korea. Immediate start. Salary that made her sit up straighter on the cold bathroom floor and read it again. Then read it a third time. Then press both hands over her mouth. South Korea. 12,000 kilometers. An ocean and a continent between her and this flat, and this bathroom floor, and the man sleeping in the next room who had no idea she was already gone in every way that mattered. She applied before she could talk herself out of it. The response came in 40 minutes. 40 minutes at 2 a.m, which told her something about the kind of operation she was walking into. A brief email, an attached NDA, a number to call at 9 the following morning. She read the NDA with the careful, practiced eye of a woman who had spent 8 years reading documents designed to obscure what they were actually saying. It was thorough. It was airtight. It was the kind of document written by people who understood that information was currency, and silence was the price of admission. She signed it. She flew out on a Thursday. 1 bag. No note. She had thought about a note and decided against it because she had learned a long time ago that leaving words behind only gave Ola something to use. She cleaned the flat the way she always cleaned before leaving anywhere. Habit. Discipline. The thing that kept her hands busy when her chest was doing things she could not afford to feel. She pulled the door shut behind her and stood in the corridor for 6 seconds with her hand still on the handle. 6 seconds. Then she let go. She crossed 12,000 kilometers and watched Busan rise out of the dark on the descent, and felt something move through her chest that she did not have a name for yet. The city was lit differently from London. Rawer. The port. The sea. The industrial waterfront blazing against the dark water like it was daring you to look away. She pressed her fingers to the cold plane window and felt something she had not felt in 2 years. Like she might be allowed to breathe here. She told herself not to trust it yet. She looked at the lights anyway. The offices of Kang Corporation occupied the top 4 floors of a glass tower in the Hyundai business district that looked like it had been built specifically to make everyone who entered it feel the precise weight of the power inside it. Zara walked in on her first morning in a sharp charcoal blazer and tailored trousers, and her natural hair pinned up, and the straight-back deliberate composure of a woman who had been in rooms designed to intimidate her before, and had learned that the only response to intimidation was to take up more space, not less. Director Choi from legal met her at the lobby, Efficient, professional. Delivered 4 rules in 3 minutes. The schedule was absolute. The confidentiality was non-negotiable. All documents above clearance level 3 required his personal authorization before she could access them. And the office on the 51st floor was accessible by appointment only. She noted all 4 rules, asked 2 clarifying questions, showed herself to her office. She was not prepared for the man. 9:02, 2 minutes after she was told he arrived. The elevator opened and Kang Jae-won walked onto the 51st floor, and the entire space made a decision about itself. He was tall and broad-shouldered, and moved with the complete certainty of someone who had never in his life needed to announce himself, because rooms already knew. His suit was dark and precise, and his shirt was open 2 buttons at the collar, showing the compass with no needle tattooed at his collarbone. The tattoos on his hands catching the morning light as he moved. Jet black hair with a single streak of silver running through it like a signature. Silver burning at both temples. A jaw so sharp it looked like it had been decided. Eyes so dark and so still they gave nothing back whatsoever. He stopped outside her office door, looked at her through the glass for exactly 3 seconds, then opened the door and walked in like it was his office, which technically it was since everything in this building was his. "You're the new counsel." She stood, extended her hand. "Zara Okafor, I started today." He looked at her hand, looked at her face, shook her hand once, brief, like he was filing her away. Then he picked up the case summary she'd been reviewing from her desk and read it while standing right there. She watched him read it and kept her face completely still, and felt the specific irritation of a woman who had spent 8 years being underestimated by men in expensive suits, and had developed a very low tolerance for it. He looked up from the file. His eyes found hers and held there, and something passed between them in that 3-second silence that neither of them had been planning for. Something without a name that already had weight. He set the file down. "My last counsel lasted 4 months," he said. "The one before that lasted 6 weeks. What happened to them?" "They asked questions they weren't supposed to ask." She held his gaze. "Then I suppose you should tell me which questions those are, so I know where the lines are." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. The ghost of one. Gone before it fully arrived. "Don't be late," he said, and walked out. She sat back down and put her pen on the desk and picked it up again. She had no name for what she was feeling, so she did not try to name it. She went back to work. She learned him the way she learned everything. In pieces. Methodically. Without allowing herself to feel too much about what the pieces meant. He arrived at 9 exactly every morning. Left at no predictable time in the evening. Moved through the 51st floor with the economy of a man for whom every action was decided before it was taken, and every word spoken was chosen from a much larger set of words that had been considered and discarded. He was the most controlled person she had ever been in a building with. The most contained. The most precise. He was also, she noted, watching her. Not obviously. She would look up from a document and catch the tail end of something moving away. Turn and find him in the corridor outside her office looking at his phone, which he had clearly just picked up to have something to look at. She noted it every time. Filed it away. Did not ask herself what it meant because she was a professional in a foreign city rebuilding something, and she had enough complications. The documents crossing her desk were the first thing that gave her the full picture. Not immediately. In pieces. A shipping contract that referenced cargo categories that had no standard classification. An international transfer document with counterparties whose corporate registrations led nowhere traceable. A legal agreement for a warehouse in the Gamshan Port District that had no commercial purpose she could identify on paper. She read everything twice the way she read everything twice, and she understood what she was looking at, and she showed up the next morning and did her job and said nothing. She was a lawyer. She understood the assignment. The NDA she had signed was comprehensive. And she had learned a long time ago that the most dangerous thing a woman in her position could do was ask the wrong question at the wrong time. She asked the right questions instead. The ones about contract structures and jurisdiction and legal exposure. The ones that made her good at her job. The ones that made Director Choi look at her after the first week with an expression that said he had not expected her to still be there. On day 9, something happened that she had not accounted for. She was working late. The floor had emptied. Busan had gone dark outside the glass, and the city was doing what Busan did at night, burning and industrial and alive in the specific way of a port city that never fully slept. She was reviewing a contract dispute when she heard it from the corridor. A short, sharp sound. The kind a body makes when it absorbs impact and the person has decided not to give the impact the satisfaction of a response. Then silence. Then footsteps. Jae-won's office door opened. He stepped out with his jacket gone and his sleeves pushed entirely up. The full landscape of the tattoos from his knuckles to his shoulders visible in the low evening light of the corridor. A cut at his jaw. He stopped when he saw her still at her desk. Looked at her for a moment. Said nothing. Then walked to the small bar in the meeting room, poured 2 glasses, set one on her desk without asking or explaining, and took his own to the window. She looked at the glass. Then she stood and walked to the window and stood beside him. Busan burned below them. "Does it happen often?" she said. "Occasionally. Occupational hazard. Something like that." She looked at his profile, at the streak of silver in his dark hair catching the city light through the glass, at the tattoos on the forearm resting against the window frame, at the cut at his jaw that he had not touched or acknowledged. "You should put something on that," she said. "It'll close." "That's not what I said." He turned his head and looked at her. Really looked. Up close in the low evening light with the city blazing behind the glass. Reading her face with the focused attention of a man who was very good at reading things, and rarely found anything that required his full attention. She looked back at him, and did not look away. "There's a first aid kit in the meeting room cabinet," she said. "Third shelf." He said nothing for a moment. Then, "I know where it is." "Then use it." Something shifted in his expression. Something that did not quite make it to the surface, but moved through the space beneath it. He looked back at the city. They stood there for another 20 minutes, neither speaking. The city enormous below them, their shoulders not quite touching. When she went back to her desk, she sat down and pressed both hands flat on the surface and stared at her screen and told herself that the warmth she was feeling in her chest was simply the whiskey. She believed approximately none of it. 3 days later, Ola found her number. She did not know how. She had changed it twice. Changed it and changed it again. And still he found it the way he always found everything, because Ola was many things. And one of them was relentless, in the specific way of a man who believed that her existence was something that happened in relation to him. The messages started at midnight. She read the first one and put her phone face down on the bed, and lay in the dark staring at the ceiling of her Busan apartment. Then she picked the phone up and read the rest of them, because she always read all of them. The same compulsion as pressing a bruise. Needing to know the shape of the damage even when knowing changed nothing. She arrived at work the next morning looking immaculate and feeling like something had been scooped out of the center of her. She was in the middle of a contract review when she felt it. The specific narrowing of the room. The way focus became difficult and the words on the page stopped making the kind of sense they were supposed to make. She gripped the edge of her desk, told herself to breathe, told herself she was Zara Okafor and she was a lawyer and she was fine and she had survived worse than this. His voice at her office door. Not the efficient professional voice. Something quieter. "When did you last eat?" She looked up. He was standing in her doorway in his suit and his open collar, and the tattoos on his hands and the streak of silver in his hair, and his eyes were on her face reading everything she had not said. "I had coffee this morning." "That is not food." "I'm aware of the distinction." He came into the office, sat down across from her desk, not in the client chair, but on the edge of it, leaning forward, elbows on knees, his eyes still on her face. Close enough that she could see the cut at his jaw from 3 nights ago. Closed now. Clean. Just a faint line. "What happened?" he said. "Nothing happened. I'm fine." "You have been staring at the same page for 40 minutes, he said. "I've been watching." She looked at him, at the admission in that, at the fact that he had just told her without apparent difficulty that he had been watching her for 40 minutes and had no intention of pretending otherwise. "Someone found my number," she said. "Someone I left behind in London. It happens." Something moved behind his eyes. Not surprise. Something older and more deliberate than surprise. "His name," he said. That is not your concern. In this building, he said quietly, everything that affects my counsel is my concern. She looked at him for a long moment. At this man sitting on the edge of the client chair in her office, with his tattooed hands loose between his knees, looking at her like she was a problem he had already decided to solve, and was simply waiting for her permission. "Hola," she said. He nodded once, stood, took out his phone, made one call in Korean that lasted 25 seconds. A voice so low and so level, it occupied the bottom register of the room entirely. Then he put the phone away and looked at her. "Lunch," he said. "There is a restaurant on the 49th floor. You are not optional." She opened her mouth. "Not optional," he said again, and walked out. She sat at her desk for 30 seconds after he left. Then she picked up her bag and followed him. They sat across from each other at a window table with busan spread out below them, and she ate and he watched her eat without watching her eat, which was a specific skill. And they talked about the contract dispute and the jurisdiction question, and the counterparty structure, and at no point did either of them mention Ola or the phone call, or the specific way the morning had gone. But when she got back to her office that afternoon, she checked her phone and found that the messages had stopped. Every single one, clean and final like a line cut by a hand that does not explain itself. She sat with that for a long time. That evening he stopped at her office door on his way out. "Lock up when you leave," he said. "I always do." He looked at her for a moment. Then, "You were good at this." She looked up from her screen. "At locking up." "At the work," he said. Something in his voice that had not been there in the previous 9 days. Something that had come down from where it was being kept. She held his gaze. "I know," she said. The corner of his mouth moved. Just barely. Just that. He left. She sat at her desk and looked at the door he had walked through and felt something she was not going to name yet. She was not ready to name it. She had spent 2 years in London naming things too late, and she had learned her lesson. She went back to work. She was still at her desk an hour later when her phone lit up. Not Ola. A different number. A number she did not recognize. One message. 4 words. "Eat breakfast tomorrow. JW." She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she put the phone face down and pressed both hands over her face and sat in the quiet of the 51st floor with Busan blazing outside the glass, and told herself very firmly that she was a professional in a foreign city who had left one complicated situation in London and had absolutely no business walking into another one. She believed it for approximately 4 minutes. Then she picked the phone back up and looked at the message again. She did not sleep well that night, but when she woke up in the morning, she made breakfast, properly, for the first time in longer than she could remember. She sat at her small kitchen table in her Busan apartment and ate it while the city came alive outside her window, and she thought about a man who had made one 25-second phone call and ended something that had been making her smaller for months. She thought about that for a long time. The following week, Detective Im Soo-yeon arrived on a Tuesday morning with sharp eyes and a calm manner, and introduced herself to Zara in the small conference room on the 51st floor, with the specific courtesy of a woman who had already read everything there was to read, and was now giving Zara the opportunity to tell it herself. She was beautiful in the precise, controlled way of a woman who had learned that beauty in her profession was a tool to be managed carefully. Dark hair cut sharp at the jaw, a structured dark coat, plain clothes that said nothing about her and everything about her discipline. She carried no visible badge, just a slim wallet ID that she presented once and put away. She asked about Ola, with the kind of careful precision that told Zara this was not the first time she had asked these questions. She asked about London, about why Zara had left, about the nature of her relationship with Kang Jae-won, about what she knew about the operations of Kang Corporation. Zara answered the questions she chose to answer, declined the ones she did not. She was a lawyer. She understood what was happening. She understood that Detective Im was building something, and that Zara was a door she was trying to open. She also understood something else. The way Im Soo-yeon's eyes moved to the 51st floor corridor every time footsteps passed. The way her posture changed fractionally when Jae-won's voice was audible through the glass. even in conversation with someone else entirely. The way she composed herself with a care that was too deliberate to be unconscious. Zara was a lawyer. She read people for a living. She read this clearly. Detective Im Soo-yeon had feelings for Kang Jae-won, had carried them for long enough that they had become part of her posture, part of the way she held herself in spaces he occupied, and she was here doing her job with the full professional discipline of a woman who had made her choice about what came first, and was living inside that choice every single day regardless of what it cost her. Zara said nothing about what she had read. She answered what she chose to answer, and at the end of the meeting, Im Soo-yeon stood and looked at her directly and said, "Be careful, Zara. Not about the case. Just be careful." Zara looked back at her. "I know what you mean." 3 seconds of complete honesty between two women in a glass conference room with Busan outside the window. "I know you do," Im Soo-yeon said quietly, and left. That evening, 5 men came off the elevator onto the 51st floor, and Zara knew immediately they were not there for a meeting. They moved wrong for a meeting. Too deliberate. Too mapped. The one at the front had something in his jacket that was not a phone, and he was looking past Zara's desk toward the far end of the floor, with the specific focus of a man who has been told exactly where he is going. She stood up from her desk. Jae-won's office door opened before she reached the phone. He stepped out and looked at the 5 men, and his expression did what she had seen it do on day 9 when she had said Ola's name. Closed down into something flat and final, and completely without temperature. The man at the front said something in Korean. She caught enough of it to understand. They wanted the ledger. They wanted it in the next 10 minutes, or they would take something else instead. He looked at Zara when he said the last part. Everything on the 51st floor went very still. Jae-won looked at where the man's eyes had gone. At Zara, then back at the man. He straightened his cuff with one tattooed hand. Then he crossed the floor. What happened in the next 45 seconds was the most precise and complete dismantling of 5 large men she had ever witnessed, and she had been in courtrooms where violence was described in forensic detail, and none of it had prepared her for this. Jae-won moved through those 5 men like he had already solved this problem before he stood up and was simply walking through the solution. The first man's arm behind him before the reach inside the jacket completed. The second man's momentum used against him so efficiently that the man himself seemed confused by where his body had gone. The third and fourth together, which should have been an advantage for them, and was not, because Jae-won simply made different calculations than the ones they were prepared for. The 5th man backing toward the elevator with both hands up before Jae-won had even fully turned to look at him. 45 seconds. 5 men. The tattoos on his forearms catching the floor light as he moved. The streak of silver in his dark hair. The absolute economy of everything. He straightened. Looked at the 5 men in their various states of the floor. "Tell Shin Dae-jung," he said quietly, "that the next time he sends people to my floor, he should send more of them." He turned. His eyes found Zara standing at her desk with her hands flat on the surface, and her face doing the thing it did when she was processing something significant and not allowing it to show. He walked back toward his office, paused at her door. "Are you all right?" "Yes." He nodded, went in. She stood at her desk for 2 full minutes after security arrived and cleared the floor, and the 51st returned to its expensive quiet. There was a story she had been telling herself about this job, about this man, about how she was going to be professional and careful, and leave Busan in 12 months with her career rebuilt and her heart intact, and no new complications to carry. She looked at his office door. That story had just ended on the 51st floor. She started a new one. The new story began on a Wednesday night that nobody planned for. A counterparty in Singapore had filed an emergency injunction against Kang Corporation at 4 in the afternoon Busan time. By 5, the legal team had scattered. By 6, it was clear that the filing had been specifically timed to cause maximum damage before the Thursday morning board meeting, and that whoever was behind it understood Kang Corporation's internal schedule in a way that suggested they had help from inside. Jae-won came to her office at 6:15. "How bad?" he said. She had already been reading for 2 hours. She looked up from the documents. "Bad enough that we need to work through the night," she said. "Good enough that we can fix it before 9 tomorrow if we start now." He looked at her for a moment. Then he took off his jacket, hung it on the back of the chair across from her desk, and sat down. "Show me," he said. They worked through the night, not side by side, across from each other. Her at her desk, him in the chair across from it, documents moving between them. Her explaining the legal architecture of the problem in the precise, clean language she used when she was fully in her element. Him asking the exact right questions, the ones that went to the center of the issue rather than the edges, which told her something about the quality of his mind that she had suspected but not yet confirmed. Around midnight, Director Choi sent food. Neither of them acknowledged it except to eat without stopping work. Around 2 in the morning, she found the thread that unraveled the entire injunction, a jurisdictional error buried in the filing that made the whole thing challengeable. She leaned back in her chair and pressed both hands over her face, and exhaled for the first time in hours. "Found it," she said. He looked up from the document he was reviewing, his eyes on her face. "Talk me through it," he said. She talked him through it, all of it. The full legal argument laid out from beginning to end with the specific clarity she brought to everything that mattered to her. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "File it," he said. "I already drafted the response. I just need your authorization." He looked at her across the desk, across the documents and the empty food containers and the Busan night, blazing through the windows behind her. Something in his expression that had not been there at 6:15 when he walked into her office and sat down. "You came to this city with one bag," he said. Not a question. Something he had been thinking about. She looked at him. "Yes." "From a situation that required leaving quickly." "Yes." "And you walked into this building and read documents that told you exactly what kind of operation you were working for," he said. "And you showed up the next morning and did your job and said nothing." She held his gaze. "That is what I was hired to do." "No," he said quietly. "You were hired to give legal counsel. What you did was something else. You made a choice about who to trust with what you knew." A pause. "I want to know why." The office was very quiet. Busan blazing outside. The documents between them. 3 in the morning, and all the professional distance that the daylight hours required had been worn down to nothing by 8 hours of work, and the specific honesty of very late nights. "Because I recognize someone who is trying to hold something together," she said, "and because I understand what it costs." He looked at her for a long time. Then he stood up from the chair and walked around the desk, and she turned in her chair to face him. And he was standing right there, and the distance between them was nothing. The streak of silver in his dark hair catching the low office light. The tattoos on his hands at his sides. The compass with no needle at his collarbone where his shirt had come open at some point in the last 8 hours of work. He reached down and took her hand. Just that. His tattooed fingers closing around her bare hand and holding it, looking at it. The same way he had looked at her wrist that day in the conference room when he first understood that she was carrying something she had not named to him yet. That same stillness. That same burning underneath the control. She stood up from the chair. They were the same height, standing like this. Face to face. Close. His hand holding hers between them. "Jae-won," she said. "I know," he said. And he kissed her. Not urgently. With the same precise, controlled focus he gave to everything that mattered to him. His free hand at her face. Her fingers gripping his shirt. His other arm coming around her and pulling her closer. The tattoos on his forearm warm against her back. The office still around them. Busan below them. 2 very controlled people coming completely undone in the most deliberate way. When they broke apart, she kept her eyes closed for one full breath. "This is a terrible idea," she said. "Probably," he said. Not apologetic. Not defensive. Just honest. "You run a criminal operation." "I run several," he said. "Technically." She opened her eyes and looked at him. At the streak of silver in his dark hair catching the low office light. At the tattoos on his forearm still warm against her back. At the compass with no needle at his collarbone. At the man underneath all of it who had ended Ola's messages with a 25-second phone call and brought her to lunch when she was hollowed out and left one message on her phone that said, "Eat breakfast tomorrow," like it was the simplest thing in the world to care about someone. who had just sat across from her for 8 hours and asked the exact right questions and looked at her like she was the most important thing in the room, even when the room contained a crisis that could cost him everything. She kissed him again. She started it this time. Rose up and pressed her mouth to his and felt the sharp breath he took like something she had earned. His arms came fully around her and she kissed him with everything. With London and the bathroom floor and the locked door and the tap running so nobody could hear her. With all of it. Every piece of it. Given to this moment completely. And he held her like she was the thing his arms had been waiting to hold without knowing what they were. Waiting for. They stayed like that until Busan began to lighten outside the windows. The first grey of the morning coming through the glass. The city shifting from night to something that was not yet day. She pressed her forehead to his jaw. Still a terrible idea, she said. She felt him smile against her hair. Real. Small. Private. Entirely for her. She had never seen it before. She understood immediately that very few people ever had. She held on. And then his phone went off. He did not move immediately. He held her for one more second. Deliberate. Like choosing to hold it against whatever was coming. Then he reached for the phone. Read the message. The warmth in his face did not leave entirely, but something moved behind his eyes. "What is it?" she said. He looked at her. "Hola," he said. "He is not in London." She went completely still. "He is in Busan," Jae-won said. "He has been here for 10 days, and he did not come here alone." She did not sleep that night. She sat at her desk, in the office until 4 in the morning after he left and filed the injunction response and watched it go. And then sat in the specific quiet of a woman who has just done 2 things in one night that cannot be undone. Defeated a legal attack that was designed to destroy something. And kissed the man she was supposed to be protecting. Legally, which was either the most professionally compromising thing she had ever done, or the most honest depending on which version of herself she was asking. She was asking the version that had sat on a London bathroom floor with the tap running. That version had a very clear answer. She got home at 5, slept for 2 hours, showered, came back. He was at the coffee machine when she arrived. He did not turn around immediately. She walked to the cabinet for her mug. When she turned, he was holding out a cup already made. Exact temperature. The way she took it. She had never told him how she took her coffee. He had simply noticed. Their fingers touched. Around the cup. Neither of them moved for a moment. "The board meeting," she said. "Handled," he said. "Your filing landed at 6:40. By 8, the injunction was withdrawn." "Good." "Yes." They stood in the kitchen with Busan coming alive below the windows, and neither of them said anything about 3 in the morning or the office or the way the city had looked through the glass when the first grey light came. Neither of them needed to. It was there between them, in the specific warmth of 2 people who have stopped pretending and are not yet ready to name what they have started. She pulled the mug gently toward herself. "Thank you," she said. "For the coffee. For last night. For all of it." "Don't thank me," he said. "Why not?" He looked at her, the tattoos on the hand still near hers on the counter. Something in his expression right at the threshold between open and closed. "Because I would do considerably more," he said quietly, "and thanks is not what I want from you." She felt that in her chest for the rest of the day and could not put it down. 3 days after that, the phone call came. She was in the middle of reviewing a shipping agreement when her personal phone lit up. Unknown number. She looked at it for a moment, then she answered. Zara. Ola's voice, and underneath the charm, something she had not heard there before. Something tight and slightly afraid. "I need to see you. Just once. Just to talk. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need 10 minutes. She kept her voice completely level. "How did you get to Busan, Ola?" "That doesn't matter. I just need..." "How long have you been here?" A pause. 10 days. "And the people you came with?" Silence. "I know you didn't come alone," she said. "I know about Shin Dae-jung. I know what he wants. And I know that whatever he told you about why he needed you here was not the full truth." She paused. "You are being used, Ola. The same way you used to use other people. I want you to think about how that feels." The line was quiet for a long moment. Zara, don't call this number again. She ended the call. She sat at her desk for 30 seconds. Then she stood and walked directly to J1's office and told him everything. The call, what she had said, what Ola had not said. He listened without interrupting, his hands flat on the desk, his eyes on her face the entire time. When she finished, he was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then he stood and came around the desk and stopped in front of her and looked at her face with an expression she was beginning to understand. The one that lived underneath all the management. The one that said things before his mouth said them. You told him you know about Shin Dae-jong, he said. Yes. That was either very brave or very dangerous. It was both, she said. Most honest things are. Something moved through his expression. He raised one hand and tucked a loose strand of her natural hair back from her face, his tattooed fingers barely, grazing her cheek in the motion. Just that. Just once. The way a man touches something he is being careful with. She felt that move through every carefully maintained professional boundary she had been trying to hold since 3 a.m, and gave up trying to hold them. What is Shin Dae-jong actually after? She said. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he walked back to his desk and sat down. He was quiet for a moment in the way of a man deciding how much to say, and in what order. There is a record, he said. A full account of every transaction, every name, every arrangement that built this operation over 12 years. Shin Dae-jong wants it because it contains information that would destroy him completely if it became available to the right people. He has been trying to get access to it for 8 months. A pause. He believes that you are the way in. She processed this. Because I'm your counsel. Because you are more than my counsel, he said quietly. And he knows. It. Which means I have made you a target by letting this become what it has become. The office was quiet around them. Busan outside the windows. The weight of what he had just said sitting between them like a third person in the room. Are you telling me to leave? She said. No, he said immediately. Without hesitation. Like the word came from somewhere below thought. Are you telling me to be careful? I am telling you, he said, that I should have told you all of this before now. And I did not. And that is on me. He held her gaze. Whatever happens next, I want you making decisions with the full information, not pieces of it. She looked at him for a long time. At this man sitting behind his desk in his expensive office with his tattooed hands flat on the surface, and his dark eyes on her face, and the streak of silver in his hair catching the afternoon light, and the compass with no needle at his collarbone, and the 12 years of a dangerous empire built on decisions that had never required him to explain himself to anyone, explaining himself to her. Thank you, she said. I told you not to thank me. I know, she said. I'm doing it anyway. The corner of his mouth moved. Just that. Just once. She went back to work. That evening, Detective Im Soo-yeon came for the second time. No appointment. She was waiting in the small conference room when Zara came back from a meeting at 5:30, sitting with her hands folded on the table and her face carrying something that was not entirely professional. Shin Dae-jong made a move this morning, Im Soo-yeon said before Zara had fully sat down. He contacted Ola directly, not through intermediaries, directly, which means he is accelerating. She held Zara's gaze. He is going to use Ola to draw you out, away from the building, away from J1, somewhere exposed, and when you go... I'm not going anywhere, Zara said. Im Soo-yeon looked at her steadily, something moving through her expression that cost her something to show. Zara, I have been building a case against Kang Jae-won's operation for 14 months. I have enough to pursue it. I have always had enough to pursue it. A pause. The specific pause of a woman choosing her next words with full awareness of what they cost. But I am sitting in this room telling you about Shin Dae-jong's movements instead of using them to advance my case. I need you to understand what that means. Zara looked at her. I understand exactly what it means. 3 seconds. 2 women in a conference room. Everything that was not being said taking up more space than everything that was. Be careful, Im Soo-yeon said. Not about the case. Just that. Just those 2 words carrying everything underneath them. I know what you mean, Zara said quietly. Im Soo-yeon nodded once, picked up her things. At the door, she stopped without turning around. He has never let anyone close enough to matter, she said. In 14 months of watching him, I have never seen what I am seeing now. A pause. Don't waste it. She left. Zara sat in the conference room for a long time after that, looking at the Busan evening through the glass, thinking about a woman who had watched someone from a professional distance for 14 months and was sitting in this room anyway, choosing what mattered over what was convenient. She thought about what it cost to do the right thing, when the right thing is not the easy thing. She went back to work. She told Jae-won everything the moment she saw him. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he stood from his desk and came around it and stopped in front of her. Close. The tattoos at his collar. The silver at his temples. The compass with no needle. Ola is going to call you, he said. I know. He is going to make it sound like he just wants to talk. One last conversation, somewhere neutral. And when you go, I already told you, she said, I'm not going anywhere. He looked at her. Something in his face that she had been learning to read. The quiet fear underneath the control. The specific fear of a man who has not allowed himself to care about something in a very long time, and has made the irreversible mistake of caring completely, and cannot undo it and would not undo it, and is standing here in his own office terrified of exactly that. She stepped forward and put her hand flat on his chest and felt his heartbeat under her palm. Fast. Already fast. Just from this conversation. The most honest thing about him, and he knew she could feel it, and he did not move away from it. I am not going anywhere, she said again, quieter this time. Just for him. He covered her hand with his, the tattoos on his fingers warm over hers. He pulled her in and held her, and she felt his chin at the top of her head and his heartbeat against her ear running away from him completely. And she understood that this heartbeat he could not manage was the truest thing he had ever given her, more than the 25-second phone call, more than the eat breakfast tomorrow message, more than the not optional lunch. This, the heartbeat that ran away from him when she was close. She held on tight. Promise me something, he said into her hair. What? Whatever you see or hear in the next few days. Whatever Ola says. Whatever anyone tells you about me or about this operation. He paused. Give me the chance to explain everything before you decide anything. She pulled back and looked up at him. Okay, she said. He kissed her then. Not gently. Not with the controlled precision of the previous night in the office. Urgent. Close. Carrying everything he was not saying. Every piece of the fear and the care and the decision he had already made about her that he had not yet put into full words. And she kissed him back the same way with everything she had. His hands in her hair. Hers gripping his jacket. Busan blazing outside the window. And she felt completely and absolutely alive. When they broke apart, she pressed her forehead to his. Whatever happens, she said quietly, I am not going anywhere. He looked at her. He said nothing. He did not have to. The call from Ola came the following evening. Unknown number. She already knew. She looked across at Jae-won's open office door. He was already watching her. She answered on speaker without being asked. Zara. Ola's voice, tighter than usual. The charm worn thin over something that sounded like genuine fear underneath. I need to see you. Just talk. 30 minutes. There is something you need to know. Something about the man you are working for. Something he has not told you. She kept her voice level. Where? Songdo Beach. The pavilion at the south end. 8 tonight. I'll think about it. She ended the call. Jae-won was in the doorway before the screen went dark. Don't go, he said. I wasn't planning to. Zara. I know, she said. She stood, walked to him, looked up. What are you going to do? He held her gaze. End it, he said. One sentence. No decoration. Carrying every implication of every word. She reached up and put her palm against his jaw. Felt him lean into it barely. Just slightly. Just enough. Call me, she said. Whatever happens tonight, you call me first. He turned his face and pressed his mouth to her palm. Warm, deliberate, staying for one full breath. Go back to work, he said softly against her hand. You first, she said. He looked at her for one more moment with the expression that had no management in it whatsoever. Then he went back into his office. She went back to her desk and stared at her screen and typed nothing for 5 full minutes and felt the warmth of his mouth against her palm and held onto it. At 7, J1 left with 2 of his men. He stopped at her desk on the way out, looked at her, did not say anything for a moment. Then he leaned down and pressed his mouth to her temple. Warm, deliberate, staying for one full breath like he was making sure he had it exactly, right before whatever came next. Lock up when you leave, he said. Be careful, she said. He walked to the elevator. She watched him go. She watched the streak of silver catching the corridor light, the tattoos on the backs of his hands, the elevator doors closing. She sat at her desk and told herself to stay, and lasted exactly 35 minutes. She knew where Songdo Beach was. She had walked it twice on Sunday mornings when the city felt too large and she needed something that moved. The pavilion at the south end was visible from the road. She told her driver to stop 2 blocks away and walked the rest. 2 of J1's security men were at the pavilion entrance, and they saw her coming and looked at each other with the expression of men who had been given an instruction and were now understanding it had never been a realistic one. She walked past them. Inside the pavilion was cold and open to the sea air, and the booze and night was enormous around it. Strip lighting from the promenade throwing shadows across the wooden boards, and she did not walk into something finished. She walked into the middle of something still happening. Shin Da-young's men, 6 of them, spread across the pavilion space. 3 of J1's men were dealing with 2 of them near the seawall, and the sounds were physical and real, bodies connecting. A man going into the wooden railing with a sound that said the conversation was over. And in the center of the pavilion, J1 himself was facing 2 men simultaneously. She stopped and she watched. He moved through those 2 men the way he moved through everything, decided before he started. The first man came at him with something in his hand, and J1 caught the wrist mid-swing, twisted once, heard the sound it made, and the thing fell. The man went to his knees. The second man was smarter and came from the side, and J1 let him come, actually let him commit fully to the movement, and then was not where he was supposed to be, and the man's momentum carried him past, and J1's forearm came across the back of his neck, and the man went down onto the wooden boards and did not immediately try to get back up. 20 seconds. 2 men, the tattoos on his forearms catching the promenade light as he moved, the streak of silver in his dark hair. Every movement decided. Not a single wasted breath. Then he looked up and saw her. The expression that crossed his face was the most unguarded thing she had ever witnessed on him. In all the weeks of learning him in pieces, in all the almost moments and the honest late nights, and the 3 in the morning office and the heartbeat she had felt running away from him under her palm. Nothing she had seen before compared to this. Relief and fury and something else entirely occupying every single inch of him simultaneously. She pointed at his cheekbone. You have a cut. He looked at her. Standing in the cold pavilion in her coat with her chin up and her bare hands at her sides and her breathing completely controlled. He released the man on the boards. The man did not attempt to stand. One of Shin's remaining men tried to move toward her from the left. Jaewon's hand shot out without him even looking in that direction, caught the man's jacket, and moved him out of her path like moving a chair. She crossed the pavilion to him, looked at the cut at his cheekbone, the blood running thin toward his jaw. She raised her hand and pressed her fingers carefully to it. He caught her wrist, gently, his tattooed fingers around it. I'm all right. You're bleeding on your face, Jaewon. The corner of his mouth moved the smallest fraction. In that pavilion with the sea air around them, and the sounds of the confrontation still fading, and the Busan night enormous above them, that small movement undid something in her chest that she had not known was still braced. Around them the pavilion settled. His men had the remaining men from Shin's side against the seawall, and in 2, chairs that had been brought in, zip-tied, side by side, Shin Da-jung, a Korean man in his 50s, expensive coat, cold, precise eyes, completely still in the way of a man who is lost and is calculating what comes next. And Ola, looking like a man who had been frightened all the way through to something honest for the first time in his life. Jae-won looked at her. "Stay here," he said. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. He held her gaze for one moment. The tattoos at his collar, the silver at his temples, the cut she had just pressed her fingers to. Then he turned to Shin Dae-jung and the warmth left his face completely, and he walked toward him. And what he said in the next 5 minutes was delivered in a voice so low and so certain that the temperature of the entire pavilion dropped around it. Zara looked at Ola. She had not looked at him directly since she walked in. She looked at him now. 2 years. That was what she was looking at. 2 years of her life sitting in a pavilion chair with zip ties on its wrists, looking small and frightened and completely out of his depth, in a situation that was always going to be too large for him. Not the enormous shadow that had followed her 12,000 kilometers. Not the voice that had found her number twice. Not the hand on her wrist on a Busan rooftop. Just a man. Ordinary. Afraid. A bad decision that had run out of road. She examined what she felt. Not pity. Not satisfaction. Something closer to the specific quiet of a woman who has finally looked at the thing that owned her for 2 years and seen it clearly. Just a man. Just a version of the past that had no claim on anything ahead of her. Jae-won glanced back at her over his shoulder, reading her face. "Do you want to say anything to him?" She looked at Ola for a long moment, at the plea in his eyes and the old habit of a man who believed that if he looked at her long enough she would soften. She saw all of it, every piece of it. Then she looked away. "No," she said. "Complete. Final." Jae-won nodded once, looked at his men. "Airport. Tonight. One direction. Make sure he understands that completely." She watched them walk Ola out of the pavilion. He looked back once over his shoulder. She held his eyes until he was gone and the pavilion was quiet, and 2 years of her life had just walked out into the Busan night. And she did not feel hollow. She did not feel loss. She felt the specific lightness of a woman who has put something down she was never supposed to have been carrying in the first place. She breathed out. Long, slow, complete. She felt him beside her before she heard him. Just there. Warm. His shoulder against hers. She turned and looked up at him. He looked down at her. "Okay," he said. "Yes," she said, meaning it more completely than she had meant anything in a very long time. He took her hand. Just that. His tattooed fingers through hers. The Busan night enormous around the pavilion. The sea moving in the dark below the promenade. The city blazing and indifferent and completely unaware. She leaned into him slightly. He put his arm around her. They stood like that. Just that. Just here. Just this. Director Choi appeared at the pavilion entrance. "Shin is asking for terms." Jae-won looked at Zara. She looked back. "Go," she said. He squeezed her hand once. Then he straightened his collar and walked back across the pavilion and into the last piece of it. She watched him go. At the tattoos on his neck. At the silver catching the promenade light. At the man who was many dangerous things and was also undeniably, impossibly with her whole chest hers. She waited. She was done waiting for anything except this. She cleaned the cut at his cheekbone in the back of the car on the way home. He sat completely still for it. She pressed a clean cloth carefully to the cut. He watched her face while she worked. The focus in her eyes. The small line between her brows. The way her bare hands moved. Steady. Completely. Gentle. "You scared me tonight," she said without looking up. "I know. I'm sorry." "Are you actually sorry?" "Yes." She looked up at him, their faces close in the back of the moving car, his eyes still. That cut at his cheekbone, the tattoos at his neck, the silver at his temples catching the passing streetlights, the streak of silver in his dark hair. "Don't do that again," she said. "I can't promise you that," he said, honestly, without softening it. She held his gaze. "Then promise me you call me first, whatever happens, every single time." He looked at her for a long moment. "I promise," he said. She went back to the cut. He kept watching her face. After a moment, he raised his hand and tucked a loose strand of her natural hair back from her face, the way he had done in the office when she had told him about Ola's call, his tattooed fingers warm against her cheek. She paused. "I know what you're doing." "Do you?" "You're distracting me." "Is it working?" She looked up. He was closer than she had realized. The cloth in her hand and the cut at his cheekbone, and the car moving through Busan, and everything they had survived to arrive at this exact moment. She kissed him, carefully at first, his cheek beside the cut, the corner of his jaw, then his mouth. He made a sound low in his throat that she felt against her lips, and his hand came to her face and the cloth fell somewhere on the seat. And she was kissing this man in the back of a moving car, with the lights of Busan streaming past the windows, and she did not care about a single complication. Not one. Not tonight. She had earned this. She took it. His arms came around her and she felt the tattoos on his forearms warm against her back, and she pressed closer and he held her tighter. And Busan kept moving outside, completely indifferent, and she kissed him like a woman who crossed 12,000 kilometers and sat on a bathroom floor with a tap running, and applied for a job at 2 a.m. and walked into the most dangerous building in Busan and built something real in the ruins of everything she thought she had lost. With everything. Every single piece of it. Given completely. And he held her like she was the thing his arms had been built for without his knowing. When they finally broke apart, she pressed her forehead to his, both of them breathing. "I was terrified tonight," she said, "just for him." "I know," he said, just as quietly. "So was I." She pulled back and looked at him. "Of Shin," she said. He looked at her directly. "Of losing you," he said. The car moved through Busan. She looked at him, at the honesty in his face. No management, no distance. Just this man saying the true thing without decoration or defense. The most unguarded she had ever seen him. And he was letting her see all of it. Choosing to let her see all of it. She kissed him again. Softer this time. Slower. Her hand against his jaw covering the cut gently. His hand in her hair. Two people choosing each other again in the dark of a moving car. And choosing again and again, as many times as it takes. When the car stopped outside her building, he walked her to her door and stood in the corridor looking at her. The light above them and the night outside, and the particular stillness of a moment that both of them knew was not an ending. It was a beginning. An actual beginning with everything known and nothing hidden. "Come in," she said. He looked at her. "Are you certain?" "I have been certain," she said, "since 3 a.m. in the office when you sat down across from my desk and asked the exact right questions." He was quiet. Then he leaned down and kissed her. Slowly. His hands at her face. Her hands at his chest, feeling his heart beat fast against her palms. She took his hand. She led him inside. In the morning, Busan came through the curtains in long gold lines, and she lay looking at the ceiling, listening to the city, and to his breathing, and to the specific quiet of her own chest. No bracing. No waiting. No holding herself ready for the part where this becomes something to survive. Just this. He woke up, turned his head and looked at her. She looked back. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," he said. 4 syllables. His voice. Her apartment. Busan. The best 4 syllables she had ever heard. He made coffee while she showered. She came out to find him at her small kitchen counter with 2 cups and the morning light on the tattoos on his forearms and the streak of silver in his unbrushed hair. He looked up when she appeared, held out her coffee. Their fingers touched around the cup. "Sit," he said. "I'll make food." "You don't have to." "Sit, Zara." She sat. She watched him move around her small kitchen and drank her coffee and thought about the bathroom floor in London, and the tap running, and the 2 a.m. job listing, and the 12,000 kilometers, and the thin thread of possibility she had not trusted yet. She trusted it now, completely, without reservation. He brought food to the table and sat across from her, and they ate in the morning quiet with Busan going gold outside the window. And she thought about how strange and how right it felt to be sitting across from this man in this city. In this life she had chosen from a bathroom floor at 2 a.m. with everything to lose. "What are you thinking?" he said. She looked at him, at the silver and the tattoos and the streak running through his dark hair and the compass with no needle, and the man underneath all of it sitting at her kitchen table eating breakfast, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "That I should have left London sooner," she said. The corner of his mouth moved. Real, small, entirely for her. They stayed like that until the city pulled him back. His phone, a message. He read it and looked at her, and something shifted behind his eyes. Not alarm. The specific look of a man who knows the world has not finished with him yet. "I have to go," he said. "I know," she said. He stood. She stood. He was across the kitchen in 2 steps, and his hand was at her face, and he was kissing her with the focused, deliberate warmth of a man who has decided something permanently. She held his jacket and kissed him back, and held on 1 extra second. Just 1. He felt her hold on. He held back. Then he let go and straightened his collar and looked at her 1 more time, with the expression that had no distance in it at all, and walked out of her apartment, and she stood in her kitchen with her coffee cooling in her hand, and felt the specific warmth of a woman who is not watching someone leave. She is watching someone come back. 2 days later, Im Soo-yeon came for the last time. Small cafe near the Haeundae waterfront. Already there when Zara arrived. No notepad. No professional armor. Just a woman sitting with her hands folded on a table like someone who has made her peace with something and has come to say so out loud. "I closed the case," she said before Zara sat down. Zara looked at her. All of it. Im Soo-yeon held her gaze. "I had enough. I chose not to. Because the woman at the center of it made her choice with her eyes completely open, knowing everything. And that is not something I get to dismantle because I wanted it to go differently." Zara felt the full weight of what it cost her to say those words, the discipline of it, the grace of it. "Soo-yeon," she said gently. "I'm not saying it for anything back," Im Soo-yeon said quietly. "I'm saying it because you deserve to hear it, and because—" She paused, looked at her hands, then back up. "Because I needed to say it out loud to someone who understands what it cost." Zara looked at her, at this woman who had walked beside her by the river, and told her the truth when she had every reason not to, who had closed a 14-month case because the right thing and the professional thing were not the same thing. "He is lucky," Zara said quietly, "even if he never knows it." Im Soo-yeon looked at her for a long moment, something moving through her expression that was more complicated than pain, and more dignified than it too. "So are you," she said. "Don't waste it." Zara smiled. "I don't intend to." When she stood to go, Im Soo-yeon stood too. Zara extended her hand. Im Soo-yeon took it. Firm, warm, final. "Take care of yourself," Im Soo-yeon said. "You too," Zara said. She walked out into the Busan spring morning. The sea smell and the port city energy and the light coming off the water, gold and clean and new. She did not look back. She knew what was behind her. She knew what was ahead. She walked back to the tower. 51st floor. Her office. The corner office with the door that was open now. Open every single day now. The man inside it who had ended Ola's messages with a 25-second phone call and sat across from her desk at 6:15 on a Wednesday evening and asked the exact right questions and kissed her at 3 a.m. when Busan was beginning to go grey and said, "I was terrified of losing you in the back of a moving car." Like it was the simplest true thing he had ever allowed himself to say. She hung up her coat, sat down, opened her laptop. "How was it?" His voice from the office without looking up. Already knowing she was there. Already calibrated to her presence the way she was calibrated to his. "Good," she said. She closed the case. He appeared in the doorway. She looked at him. He crossed the floor to her desk, stopped in front of her, reached down and took her hand, and she let him pull her up, and she was standing close with his hand around hers, and the streak of silver in his dark hair catching the afternoon light, and the tattoos on his fingers warm against her skin. He looked at her face, at Zara, who had crossed 12,000 kilometers and sat on a bathroom floor, with a tap running, and walked into the most dangerous building in Busan, and built something real in the ruins of everything she thought she had lost, who had worked through the night on a Wednesday and told the truth at 3 in the morning, and kissed this man in an office with Busan going grey outside the glass, who had stood in a pavilion and pressed her fingers to a cut at his cheekbone like it was the most natural thing in the world, who had chosen herself first, then chosen him. He cupped her face in both hands, the tattoos on his fingers against her jaw, his eyes on hers. Every degree of management dropped. Just him. Just the man underneath all of it. He kissed her. Slow. Deep. Thorough. Like a man who has stopped managing the distance between himself and the things he wants. Like a man who has decided that wanting something and standing in it fully is not weakness. That it is in fact the only kind of strength that matters. She kissed him back with everything she had. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his, both of them breathing. The 51st floor quiet around them, Busan blazing through the windows. "Come home with me," he said. She looked up at him. "You should have asked me sooner." "I know," he said. She reached up and straightened his collar, let her hand rest on his chest, felt his heartbeat, still fast, still running away from him when she was close, still the truest thing he had ever given her. "You're asking now," she said. "I'm asking now," he said. "Then yes," she said. "Always yes." He looked at her and Kang Jae-won, who controlled everything and managed everything and kept everything at a precise, calculated distance, for a very long time smiled. Not the managed almost smile, the real one. Full and warm and private and entirely for her. She was going to spend a very long time making sure she kept seeing it. She picked up her bag. He took her hand. They walked to the elevator together. The doors opened. They stepped inside. The doors closed. Busan kept burning below, enormous and gold and indifferent, entirely unaware that somewhere in a glass tower above it, woman who had been running for 2 years had finally completely permanently stopped. She was not the woman on the bathroom floor. She was not the woman who ran the tap so nobody could hear her. She was not the woman who applied for jobs at 2 in the morning and crossed 12,000 kilometers just to breathe. She was Zara. She was loved. She was home. The elevator descended. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He pressed his mouth to her hair. Busan carried them down into its light. She smiled. He felt it against his shoulder. "What?" he said quietly. "Nothing," she said. He looked down at her, found everything she was not saying, and read every word of it. Something in his expression opened entirely. Every degree of management gone. Just him. Just this. He pulled her closer. Busan kept burning below. She kept her eyes closed. She was already home. If you made it to the end of this story, you already know what it cost her to get here. 2 years of shrinking, 12,000 kilometers of running, and one job listing at 2 in the morning that turned out to be exactly the door she needed to walk through. Some of you watching this are in the middle of your own version of that journey. You are not at the ending yet. You are still in the part where you are sitting on a bathroom floor with the tap running, praying nobody hears you. But you are moving, and that matters more than you know. Drop your city in the comments. Let us see where Zara's story traveled today. Share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe. Because every week we come back here and we tell stories about women who choose themselves, even when it is terrifying, even when the man offering safety has tattoos up to his collarbone and a streak of silver in his dark hair, even when you are not sure the version of yourself you are running towards still exists. Zara found her. And so can you.